Ciao everyone, this is Deidre and Lowell here at Italian Cowboy in Rockport, Fulton, Texas. Today our class is all about polenta, how to cook it, how to serve it, all different kinds of ideas of how to eat and enjoy polenta. So with that, we'll get started. Lowell, who makes delicious polenta by the way, is going to get started by preparing some polenta.
Sounds good. So what we've got is polenta, salt, and the controversial ingredient, a little baking soda. I tend to go with 5 cups of water for every cup of polenta, and then a teaspoon of salt as well, and then a pinch of baking powder. The baking powder tends to break it down, make it a little quicker cooking, and also you don't have to stir it as much. What I've got here, because we've got a smaller pan for the demo here, is 3/4 of a cup of polenta. So doing quick math, that's 3 3/4 cup of boiling water. This is really the hardest part, is when you want to stir it into your boiling water. Just keep the water moving when you stir it in. It's the easiest way to avoid getting lumps in it. And so what we've got is a little stir. And then what we're going to do is bring it back up to the heat. And as soon as back up to the heat, we're going to, by which I mean it's boiling again, we're going to cover it and set a timer for this about 10 minutes. And we're going to tell you why after Deidre talks about the history of polenta.
So, polenta. So, one of the questions we get asked a lot in the store is, well, I love to eat Italian food, but I can't because I'm trying not to eat gluten. And so, and I think that's one of the reasons why people ask that question is because when we think about Italian food, especially here in the States, we think pasta, red sauce, and pizza, all of which are delicious, all of which I love, but in actuality, in North Italy, as your starch, you would be likely to be served and enjoy polenta. Polenta has actually been a staple of Italy for many, many years, dating back to Roman times. During Roman times, however, it was made with farro. After the introduction of corn, mainly through the trade in Venice at that time, in say the 1500s, corn became available and began to be planted and enjoyed, and therefore then polenta became prepared with corn. And so when you travel to various parts of North Italy, you will see polenta served as your starch. It's delicious. It comes in either, you can have coarse polenta or fine polenta first, and sometimes it's personal preference, or which one you choose, personal preference, or how you want to serve it. But it's very delicious and very versatile, and it's also very filling. My grandpa had said that after the war in Italy, they didn't have a lot of money, there was a lot of poverty, and polenta historically has also been a poverty food because it is so filling and nourishing, but doesn't cost much money. So it also has humble origins in that way, like a lot of Italian food, true Italian food does. Today, the polenta we are using is this delicious, fabulous polenta from Moretti up in Lombardy in North Italy. They are located north of Milan in Bergamo, and for those of you who've been in the store, you've probably seen these little square blocks that we sell, one with the orange and one with the green packaging. One's coarse, one's fine. You can, but any fine and coarse polenta will do. And this is a controversial statement I'm about to make, but it's essentially Italian grits. So you can kind of think of it that way. I think that helps describe what it is, because it's kind of like grits.
It's ground cornmeal, and the difference between fine and coarse is just the fineness of the grind. And as it relates, Deidre talks about preference. Part of it's the way it, feels in your mouth. The coarse is going to have a little more crunch, or a little more, not crunch, but a little more resistance once it's cooked. The fine is going to be a bit more smooth. It's personal preference, although we're cooking fine today for two reasons. One is the fine tends to cook a little more quickly, and we're trying to show you how quickly this cooks, but also we're going to make a dish which is one of the few things that I find that actually works better with the fine than the coarse. You'll have to stay tuned about 6 more minutes to find out what that is. And what we're doing over here is we've started it boiling. After about 5 minutes, we're going to give it a stir. This is really kind of the only stir you need to do, whether or not it's fine, whether or not it's coarse. If you're doing coarse, you'll find that the total cooking time is probably somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes. Again, every miller is gonna grind their polenta to a different grind, right? So you can't always say coarse polenta cooks this much. And so 20 to 30 minutes for coarse. This fine polenta, you're gonna find anywhere from probably like 7 to 15 minutes. The Moretti fine, we find cooks probably in about 7 to 8 minutes. So I'm just gonna give this a little stir.
Yeah, that's coming along well.
I'm gonna give it a little stir. You're gonna do two things here. One, make sure it's not really sticking to the bottom. And also you'll find that on the edges, as it thickens up, the water comes to the edges. We're just sort of moving it in. And lots of people have said, well, you gotta sit there and stir polenta all the time. Certainly you can stir it as much as you like, but particularly with the addition of the baking soda and with a pan like this, which is not non-stick, but it's less sticky. The Le Creuset pan really holds its heat well and has that enameled cast iron which doesn't stick as much. I find that you really only need to stir it at about 5 minutes and then right towards as you get to the end. On the other hand, I'm not always the one doing the dishes.
That's true.
And can I trade you? I'll grab that little Pyrex as a spoon rest.
Oh,
and trade you those two.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, and was this came from America's Test Kitchen?
Right? Cook's Illustrated.
Cook's Illustrated.
Back in the day, even before it became America's Test Kitchen. Yeah, that's a Cook's Illustrated hack.
A little tip.
And works really well.
Yeah. So, how's it coming along?
It's coming along pretty well, and so what I'll tell you is what we're going to do next. As I said, it cooks really quickly. I will grab the handy phone timer and tell you that we've been going for about, a little over 5 minutes, as you saw. And what we're going to do at the end is take it off the heat and mix in a little butter and a little Parmigiano. So I'm going to cut a little of this wonderful Strauss family creamery butter, delicious European-style butter, nice and rich. We're just going to do 3 little smidges here. Adds up to about a tablespoon of butter for the 3/4 of a cup of polenta that we have. And again, with all of these things, do it to taste. Oftentimes we find ourselves without butter in the fridge, and I use olive oil. It tastes a little fruitier, but it certainly loosens it up, so it's really nice. And if you don't have Parmigiano, you can use any cheese you have around. If you want it, dairy-free, you can do dairy-free. You'll see that with the dish that we've got here at the end, we did that without any dairy or either cheese or butter. And so it's very easy to do the dish vegetarian, vegan, without dairy, with whatever you want. So I'm gonna grate cheese, and Deidre's gonna keep talking polenta.
I am. So one thing is the use of butter. A lot of times people will associate Italian cooking with olive oil, and rightfully so. But in fact, in North Italy, you will find butter used. Again, one of the things that is so interesting about Italian cooking and Italian food is its true diversity and how regional it is, how healthy it is, and how easy a lot of it is to prepare. Polenta is one of those dishes, kind of like risotto, that I think, we hear a lot of times people will say, oh gosh, I've never been able to get risotto right, or I've never been able to get polenta right. And so that's why we wanted to have a class on it today and demonstrate it, because it is very doable. Now, you will see, you'll hear and see the people in Italy will use, these big copper pots and all of these things, and you have to have this special pot. If you want all that, that's fine. But realistically, we use this. It's already in our pantry, and it works fine for us. So because we get asked that question a lot too. what pot do I use to make it? And one thing also before we put away this Parmigiano, I would say is we're using a 24 month age Parmigiano Reggiano. It is absolutely delicious, and like a true Parmigiano Reggiano is packed with flavor that really concentrates as it ages. And when you're through with the Parmigiano, you can reserve the rind. Use that rind in soups, in stews to flavor beans. It's very delicious. So keep that rind once you're done with the cheese. And there's another little tip.
And I normally do this on an induction burner. It's a little quicker and a little more responsive. That's why I was taking the lid off and seeing what was happening in here. Obviously, we're doing it on a resistance burner today because the induction's a little loud, and we didn't think we were going to be able to hear. So it looks like we're done at probably, I'll double check in a minute, but probably about 7 minutes, I think, actually. Actually, it was closer to 9. But what we're doing now is off the heat. We're just mixing in the butter. This will really help loosen it up. You'll hear the term, especially as it comes to risotto, Alando. The Italians like their risotto and their polenta a little creamy. This actually really helps with the creaminess. Also, once we put in the Parmigiano, it's going to start to thicken up a little, so the butter sort of does help reduce that thickness. The last thing that we're going to talk about as I'm letting this Parmigiano sort of melt into the pan is what Deidre was mentioning before is sort of the inexpensiveness of this. So what you'll see, and this is a lot of polenta. I don't know if you can see how much this is, but there's a lot of polenta here, and it comes from 3/4 of a cup. This little bag of polenta, 500 grams, for those of us here on the non-metric system, is about a pound. That's going to hold at least 4 of these servings. It's going to be 4.5 of these servings. So this bag is depending on where you get it, you can pay anywhere from whatever $2 to whatever 10
$5,
10
yeah,
or this
yeah.
for a really
Polenta's
nice
not expensive.
high quality Italian polenta that's organic is $5, but it's going to give you what's clearly, Deidre and I, and we can put away the polenta, probably couldn't even split this between the two of us. So it's going to give you 10 or 12 servings for that $5.
And that's one of the things that we want to do and demonstrate with cooking these things up is sometimes people will pick up a bag and it's a little deceiving that once something starts to absorb that water and cook, it often really bulks up, and so and becomes quite a filling meal. So. And
what Deidre's got over there on the table is just a couple ideas for toppings. They're actually things that if you watched our first couple of classes, you will notice. One's the truffled broccoli and cannellini beans. And then the other is the stewed chickpeas. As we mentioned at the time, those are delicious dishes on their own, but they're also really good toppings on top of stuff like pasta or, in this case, polenta. So with your polenta and just a small amount of truffle cannellini beans, you've got a really nice meal. Similarly with the stewed chickpeas. So they are easy to top, and if you don't have these, you can use anything. We often will do it just with some leftover pasta sauce and cheese. So it's sort of like, the pasta base. You can put almost anything on this. Frankly, you could do this for breakfast, and the same way that you would have, cream of wheat,
like malto meal.
Meal.
Absolutely.
You could have breakfast.
Raisins, put a little sugar in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you could absolutely make this a breakfast. And of course, with the polenta being really more northern Italian, with the cannellini beans and the broccoli and the little bit of truffle, it's just a wonderful, hearty, nourishing meal.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, one of the reasons that we wanted to use the fine grits here is because this is a wonderful preparation. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this without the cutting board, so if you don't mind,
I will do my Vanna here.
Try the cutting board again here.
Okay.
What we did yesterday is we made this amount of grits and we just put it into this little container. Oftentimes we'll just do this on a cookie sheet. You'll see I've got a little parchment sling here to make sure it comes out. But once you've got it out, what you'll do is you'll just slice it into little squares, and then they're great either grilled or sautéed in like a pan with a little olive oil. You can make them whatever thickness you want. This ended up a little thicker, but you can see it's just a nice cake. You throw that on, get some nice grill marks on it, and then it pairs with anything. That and some grilled shrimp is delicious. You know, it's also good as the base for anything. If you've got some like long braised, you know, meat, ossobuco, you've got, you know, anything, you know, it would go great with, you know, like shredded beef, mushrooms would be a great addition to that. And so that's one of these dishes where the fine works a little better because it doesn't have that sort of resistance. It's got a nice smooth texture, and it goes great as the base, again, grilled and nice and firm for any of those things.
Absolutely. Garlicky greens.
Garlicky greens.
Yeah,
Oh, that would be really good.
Saute up just a little olive oil with some garlic. Put in either kale, spinach, collards, whatever green you like, and then put it over a bed of either just the cooked polenta or some grilled polenta. Fabulous, delicious, and very healthy.
And wine.
Of course. Our favorite part.
Our favorite part of the class is the wine pairing. And so, interestingly, you've seen these dishes before, but they're now a little different because they've got the polenta. So last time we did the stewed chickpeas, we used sort of a heartier, more Chianti-esque wine. Here, because the polenta is a little sweet, that sweetness is going to start to take a little hold, and so we've got a nice fruitier red from the Piedmont, Barbera d'Asti, nice, rich, dark wine, gonna pair really well with the dark tomato sauce, but not really fight with the slightly sweeter grits. For the truffle cannellini beans, last time we did things that were a bit more earthy. Here we're going to use something that's a little on the lighter, more minerality side. It's a suave. It's got some of that lemony crispness, some of that smoothness, but also some nice minerality. It's going to play well with this really complex dish because it's sweet, it's creamy, it's vegetal, and it's got that earthiness from the truffle. So it's a complex dish, needs a complex wine. The suave is a great option for that. And then when you're talking about grilling something that's nice and sweet and you don't know what it's going to pair with, as we like to say here at Italian Cowboy, bubbles pair with everything. So because, in part, I don't know how you're going to prepare this, I'm bringing over a bottle of Franciacorta. It's a really nice Method Champenois. This particular one is 100% Chardonnay, so it's the champagne equivalent of a Blanc de Blanc. But you could definitely do something that has a little Pinot Nero in it as well, a little Pinot Noir. But it's the bubbles will pair with the sweetness, and it'll cut through. If you do something meaty or earthy like mushrooms or beef, it'll cut through that. And if you do something with it that's a little sweeter, it'll sort of cleanse your palate. So bubbles pair with everything. If you don't know what you're making with it, bubbles are your answer.
You cannot go wrong with Franciacorta. I'm just going to say that. You really can't. It is absolutely one of my favorites. And as you can see, all of the wines that Lowell chose for this particular class, these particular pairings, are all Northern Italian wines because really we're using a lot of, with the polenta, you know, a little more Northern Italian ingredients. Well, I guess the stewed chickpeas are more Roman. But, you know, but polenta being more Northern Italian, we chose those.
We did.
And they are all, again, you can't go wrong with the suave. I mean, fantastic with seafood, by the way. If you decide to go the seafood route and pair the polenta with like shrimp and grits, this is a wonderful wine to have chilled.
Definitely. So I think that's it for polenta. Next week, I'm pretty sure we're doing risotto.
I think so. I think next time we're going to do risotto.
But you'll have to tune in to find out.
Absolutely. Okay. Bye-bye, y'all.
Thanks for stopping
Thanks.
by.